Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news bulletin coming to you from Channel 2. This is Lamia Abdel-Sattar, and we'll start with the headlines. Vatican says 250,000 people attend Pope Francis' funeral. Hamas says open to 5-year Gaza truce, one-time hostages release. And Iran and US hold expert talks in Oman over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. Details. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has delegated Presidential Advisor for Religious Affairs and Minister of Endowments, Osama al-Azhari, to attend the funeral of Pope Francis. Al-Azhari expressed profound sorrow over the passing of Pope Francis, describing him a figure of immense humanitarian contributions and noble efforts. He praised the Pope as a unique and exceptional leader who stood as a global symbol for the defense of human values and a true advocate worldwide. The Vatican said Saturday that more than 250,000 people assembled at St. Peter's Square for the funeral of Pope Francis. The funeral included U.S. President Donald Trump, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, and some 50 other world leaders. We have the details. The Vatican said that around 200,000 people attended the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday. Italian police had earlier put the number at around 150,000, with roughly 50,000 people filling St. Peter's Square. The grand funeral of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church's first Latin American leader, began in the presence of world leaders and tens of thousands of mourners. After waiting in somber silence, the crowd in St. Peter's Square began clapping as the pontiff's coffin was brought out in solemn procession shortly after 10 a.m. In front of hundreds of world leaders attending the funeral of Pope Francis, Italian Cardinal Giovanni Battista recalled for care for migrants, an end to wars, and action on global climate change, France's favorite political themes. He added that Pope Francis urged reason and honest negotiation in efforts to end conflicts raging around the world. Francis, Pope since 2013, died on Monday at age 88. His funeral, which included U.S. President Donald Trump, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, and some 50 other world leaders, was a carefully choreographed affair with Latin chants, strictly organized sitting, and use of ancient Catholic rites. Welcome back. Egypt welcomed the signing of a declaration of principles on Friday in Washington by the governments of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Republic of Rwanda on achieving stability, peace, and economic development in eastern Congo. In a foreign ministry statement, Egypt affirmed that this step represents progress towards building confidence between the two countries and enhancing opportunities for achieving regional peace and stability in the Great Lakes region and in the African continent. Egypt hailed the two parties' agreement to exert utmost efforts to solve conflicts through peaceful means. Egypt also stressed its support for all efforts aimed to settle disputes by peaceful ways in Africa, respect the international law and the constitutive law of African Union that will contribute in achieving regional and international peace. An official in the Palestinian Hamas movement said the group seeks a 5-year truce with Israeli occupation army to end its genocide in Gaza. The official said Saturday, ahead of talks with mediators in Cairo, that such a truce would see all captives released in an exchange with Palestinian prisoners in a single batch. Hamas has consistently demanded that a truce deal must lead to an end to the war, a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and a lifting of Israeli blockade. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation attacks in the Gaza Strip killed 10 Palestinians and left tens wounded overnight into Saturday. At least 10 people, most of them children, were killed when a strike hit a family house in the Gaza Strip as Israeli blockade continued for almost 2 months. Philip Lazzarini, head of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency UNRWA, said the crisis was man-made, calling for a lifting of the siege. The World Health Organization said the situation was no different for medical supplies. Israel's military said Saturday it had intercepted a missile fired from Yemen, whose Houthi rebels have launched attacks throughout the Gaza war, as well as a drone approach. Syria's Foreign Minister Asad Ashibani urged the UN Security Council members to pressure Israel to leave Syrian territory. In his first United Nations speech, he also urged a lifting of international sanctions slammed against Syrian former regime as Ashibani slammed Israeli airstrikes in Syria as not only a flagrant violation of international law and Syrian sovereignty, but also a direct threat to national stability. UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen, also warned that Israelis' violations of Syria's territorial integrity are undermining the transition. Pedersen also said that the country's transition from the Assad years was at a truly critical juncture, warning that the situation is extremely fragile. Oman's foreign minister said on Saturday that Iran and the United States will continue negotiations on a potential nuclear deal with a fourth round next week. After a third round of talks ended with his mediation, Omani minister said core principles, objectives, and technical concerns were all addressed in the meetings in Muscat. The talks seek to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of the crushing economic sanctions the U.S. has imposed on Tehran. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff spoke through the Omanis, while experts on both sides also negotiated details of a possible deal. A Russian drone struck an apartment building in a southeastern Ukraine city, killing 3 people and injuring 10 others, a day after U.S. President Donald Trump rebuked Russia's leader. Moving to the news of business and economy, where Egypt's governor at the World Bank Group and Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashat, said that Egypt intends to achieve strategic transition for making economic growth through stimulating investments and localizing industry. The minister made the remarks Saturday to comment on a recently issued report by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that expected the increase of Egypt's economic growth to 3.8% in 2025 fiscal year and 4.2% in 2026 fiscal year. El-Mashat said such expectations reflect the outcomes of the Egyptian structural reforms, highlighting the government's efforts on offering investment incentives, localizing industry procedures, and cutting time for tax clearance, among others. The International Monetary Fund highlighted in its latest report the top 10 African countries with the highest gross domestic product in 2025. According to the fund statistics, Egypt topped the list of countries with the second highest GDP in Africa in 2025, with South Africa projected to remain the continent's largest economy in 2025, with a GDP of $410.34 billion, although Egypt briefly surpassed South Africa in 2023, accounting for 13.63% of Africa's total GDP. It has since fallen to second place with a projected GDP of $347.34 billion. The World Bank's chief economist Indermit Gill said spiking trade uncertainties, compounding rising debt and sluggish growth problems facing emerging markets and developing countries by cutting their own tariffs could provide a big boost. Gill said global economists were rapidly lowering their growth forecasts for advanced economies and somewhat less so for developing countries, at least for now, in the wake of a tsunami of tariffs announced by U.S. President Donald Trump. Gill said high debt levels mean that half of some 150 developing countries and emerging markets are either unable to make debt service payments or at risk of getting there, a rate that was double the level seen in 2024 and could grow further if the global economy slowed. And to the exciting world of sports, where Mamelodi Sundowns of South Africa edged Al Ahly from the CAF Champions League after a 1-1 draw in the second leg semi-final. The Red Devils held away a goalless draw with their rivals last Saturday. Meanwhile, Pyramids qualified for the final match after defeating South African side Orlando Pirates 3-2 in the other semi-final clash of the CAF Champions League. Pyramids, appearing in the semi-finals round for the first time in their history, also held a 0-0 draw with their hosts last weekend. Barcelona and Real Madrid meet on Saturday at 11 p.m. Cairo local time in the Copa del Rey final on Saturday, with more than just the trophy on the line. Barcelona wants to grab the first piece of potential trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our news bulletin. That was Lamia Abdel Sattar. Thank you for watching.